Hello and welcome to CJRU tutorial number 1, using Audacity. In this video, we'll learn how to use Audacity to record, edit, mix, save, and export a radio piece or podcast. This tutorial is tailored for volunteers at our campus community radio station, CJRU 1280 AM in Toronto. But most of the information should be applicable to anyone recording and editing radio or podcast pieces. We use Audacity at CJRU because it's free, full-featured, and easy to use. Audacity is an excellent choice for beginners and experts alike, and while paid software such as Adobe Audition, Ableton, or Hindenburg may offer features that aren't available on Audacity, a resourceful producer will find no limits to what they can do on Audacity. We're going to start off with recording. The first step when recording is to make sure your input, channels, and outputs are set correctly. At CJRU, the input in the Red Studio should be set to loopback, the channel should be set to stereo, and the output should be set to Soundcraft Signature 22. In the Blue Studio, the input and output should be set to USB audio codec, and the channel should be stereo. These will be the default settings and should already be set up, but it's worth checking, especially if something isn't working for you. At home, the input and output will likely be whatever interface your microphone is plugged into, or built-in input and built-in output if you're recording directly into your computer's microphone. The next step is to set your recording level. At CJRU, that means adjusting the slider for the microphone or microphones you're using. The further up you push them, the louder your recording level. The further down, the quieter. At home, this might mean adjusting the gain knob or the slider on your preamp or mixer. You can monitor your recording levels on Audacity by clicking up here. You'll see that the monitor ranges between -60 dB and 0 dB. Audio below -60 is basically too quiet to use. And audio that reaches 0 dB is at the maximum volume for digital audio and will distort or peak. When we record our voices into Audacity, we want to keep the meter somewhere in between -18 dB and -12 dB, so we have lots of useful signal but keep a safe distance from distorting or peaking at 0 dB. When setting your levels, make sure you're sitting comfortably. You'll want to maintain that position and, more importantly, that distance from the microphone for the whole recording. If you're recording an interview, make sure to set the recording level for your guest as well. Ask them an easy question that they'll be happy to answer, like what's your favorite movie or your favorite restaurant? Make sure that it's off topic, so it's clear to them that you're not starting the interview. Ask if they're sitting comfortably and let them know that the recording will sound best if they maintain that position and more importantly, that distance from the microphone for the whole recording. If there are any surfaces around them that they might tap with their hands, legs, or chair, remind them that any sounds will make it into the recording. Make sure that you're monitoring or listening to your recording with a pair of studio headphones. This way, you'll know if your gear isn't functioning properly, or a noise in your environment is disturbing the recording. At CJRU, you can adjust the headphone volume using the slider on the headphone channel, and adjust the headphone volume individually using the splitter. At home, there should be a headphone gain knob or slider on your preamp, interface, or mixer. Before recording, make sure to mute any previous tracks you won't want to hear while recording, such as previous takes. Or use solo to only monitor the track you're recording to. If you're at CJRU, unless you're recording audio from a computer app like Google Chrome, Soundboard, or Cross DJ Free, it's important to check that the computer channel is down on the mixing board while recording. Otherwise, any tracks being played back will be mixed into your new recording. At CJRU, you'll create and begin recording on a new track when you click the record button. You can also choose to continue recording on an existing track by holding the Shift button while clicking the record button. At home, Audacity's default may be the opposite, where clicking the record button will lead you to continue recording on an existing track, while holding Shift will create a new track to record on. You can choose the default recording setting in the Preferences menu by clicking on the Recording submenu and toggling Record on a New Track. You can end a recording by clicking stop. You can also temporarily pause a recording by clicking pause. Be advised that once you've paused, most functions will not be available until you've stopped the recording. Always record an extra 10 seconds with the microphones at the same level at the end of your recording and stay silent. We'll be using that recording later as our noise floor for noise reduction. Once you're done recording your audio, it's important to save it twice. At CJRU, you'll want to make yourself a folder within the volunteer folder. The volunteer folder is located on our desktop. Let's make myself a new folder right now. Inside of your folder, you'll want to save 2 copies there. The first version is your editing copy, which you're going to do further work on. The second copy is your raw version, which you're going to leave as is. This is just in case something happens with your editing copy and you want the original to do further edits on. You'll keep it as a backup. Once you've opened an editing copy of a recording, or you've imported an audio file into Audacity, you'll want to listen back to it. At CJRU, you'll need to make sure that the computer channel is on and turned up in order to hear the playback of your recording. As you listen back, you'll want to edit out anything you don't want in your finished piece. This may include long pauses, uhs and ums, lip smacks, repetitions, mistakes, or whole sections that you don't think are going to serve your piece. The goal is to boil down your recording to its most interesting material without making it sound unnatural. Listeners will notice in edit if there's a sudden change in a speaker's tone, rhythm, or breathing pattern. There will be times when you have no choice but to leave a stumble or an in your audio to prevent such a change from happening. And this is totally okay. If you can't make an edit sound natural, it's best to leave it as is. When editing, you'll want to zoom in on the waveform, using the zoom, until you can clearly see each individual word and breath. Now we can see them. Here are the words. Ideally, you'll want to make edits from the beginning of a word until the end of the corresponding pause following it. This pause may be a silence with a flat waveform or a breath, which usually appears like a small bump. The reason you want to start at the beginning of a word and end at the end of a pause is that breaths and even silences can be shaped by the word preceding them or the word that's before them. It will sound most natural if you keep silences and breaths paired to the word before them. To select part of an audio track to delete, make sure you're using the time selection tool. Click at the beginning of a word or phrase you'd like to delete and drag until the end of the breath or silence following it, right about there. Once it's been selected, it can be deleted with the delete key, or it can be cut and pasted somewhere else in the track or Audacity project using Command X on Mac, Control X on PC, or by going into the Edit menu and clicking Cut. Sometimes you'll need to make an edit when 2 words are stuck to each other without a pause. This is difficult, but not impossible. Let's check in an example right now. Where you hear how I go, well, where, I kind of stumble on it, and it's one continuous word. So the trick is to zoom in close enough to see the smallest waves within the waveform. So let's do that right now. And now we can see the waveform on its smallest level. When one word leads into the next, you'll notice a distinct change in the pattern of these smallest waves. Try and locate the point at which this change takes place, and then begin your edit at the closest point where the waveform intersects with the horizontal line representing 0. That is a little confusing, but okay. We see big, tall waves. Now we see waves with a little hiccup and now those continue, and then they get a little bit bigger. So I think that it's probably it's either in this section where the where starts, the second where, this section or this section. It's somewhere in between. And we might have to do a little guess and check. But I'll tell you one thing for sure. Where I want to make the edit is right where one of these waves crosses that line that represents 0, because that's the best place to edit. So I'm going to make a bit of an informed guess that it's somewhere around here, that if I make an edit there, it's going to sound relatively good. Let's see how this works. So let's pretend this is where the word starts. Let's drag and get rid of that w, so it just goes right into the where. And hopefully this will work out for us. It won't be perfect, but let's hear it. To your life. Where can magic be found? So not perfect, but that's a bit of a tricky situation. At least now it's not what, where. Instead, it's just where. Let's hear that one more time.
No problem. Happy to be here.
So Chrysanthemum, how does magic relate to your life? Where can magic be found? A little bit better than what, where, you might say. A few more things to watch out for: lip smacks, ums, and ahs. Lip smacks occur usually before someone starts talking and can range from quiet, subtle crackles that sound pretty natural and fun to loud pops that should be removed. If you ever see a waveform that looks like a thin single line shooting up out of nowhere, it's probably a lip smack to remove. Let's listen to this one. It's going to sound a lot better if we just delete that and start with the word instead of the lip smack. Let's hear it now.
Well,
Ums and ahs typically appear as smooth, thick waveforms in between pauses or jammed up against words. People rely on these mouth sounds to buy them time when speaking, and they become part of the cadence of their speech. The more ums and ahs you can remove, however, the more eloquent, interesting, and confident your speaker will appear. But be sure not to make their cadence sound unnatural. Sometimes ums and ahs can't be removed, especially when they bleed into the next word. Right now we're going to listen to a phrase, a sentence, with a couple ahs or a couple ums, and we're going to see what happens when we pull them out, and also how to pull them out. So let's listen.
I remember my first service was on a 98-year-old retired judge. I think he was actually a sitting judge, actually, but he was like a character from Charles Dickens. He had a 3-piece navy, 22-ounce worsted wool suit, hunched over, 5.
So there's 3 ahs that we encountered there. The first one was in between this description of the suit. This will be really easy to get rid of because we can see it it's in the middle of two sentences, and there's some nice silence basically in between them. So remember, before we were talking about when we edit, we want to start from the beginning of the sound to the end of the silence following that sound, because that whole silence is going to be shaped by how that sounds. So let's pull back here and see how this description sounds now, the description of the suit.
I remember my first service was on a 98-year-old retired judge. I think he was actually a sitting judge, actually, but he was like a character from Charles Dickens. He had a 3-piece navy, 22-ounce worsted wool suit.
So it has a little bit more rhythm to it, a little bit more flow. We're not interrupted by the Remember, here we have an that's stuck against another word.
Hunched.
So we know it goes till about there. That's when that hunch comes in. And now we'll pull up the skills that we talked about before, zooming right in, seeing where the pattern changes. It's quite obvious here, actually. We can see and then the H sound. So we're going to find the point where it meets the line that represents 0. And let's just drag it back. Let's see if maybe this will improve things too. Zoom out. Go from wherever that 3-piece suit is, I think.
Charles Dickens. He had a 3-piece navy, 22-ounce worsted wool suit, hunched over, 5'0".
Yeah, so that didn't sound great. We probably could have made a cleaner edit. The point is, the more ums you pull out, the more the ratio of description and interesting information is left compared to overall talking. Less time wasted, less time where you're just waiting for more description, and that makes your audio a lot better. So how did you go about developing your knowledge and your practice of witchcraft? As you listen through your audio, you'll want to input labels to mark the start of interview questions or new discussion topics. This will make it easier to find specific parts of your audio going forward. You can do this on Mac using Command B and writing the name of your label. It's also Control B on a PC, so you can do it that way. Or up in the Tracks menu, you can do Add Label at Selection, and that will lead to the same thing. You'll notice that these labels are appearing on what we call a label track, which is not audio, it's simply just a label track. Keep in mind that the labels stay fixed to the overall project timeline rather than the specific audio. So if you start editing the audio shorter, the labels will then be kind of out of sync with the audio. You might have to move them around. Once your project has been labeled, you can export those labels as a text file, which can be used to share timestamps with collaborators or on the web. Here's how you do that. Export labels. And now it's a text file. You can call it whatever you want, and it will show at such and such a time, such and such a label occurs. And this is a really useful thing. Once you've finished editing the dialogue in your project, you may want to add music. Make sure that you can use a song before you add it to your project. At CJRU 1280, if it's copyrighted music, it must meet our music policies listed in the Radio Music Guide and should be from the artist being discussed when applicable. You can find copyright-free music by searching for it on Google. Whether you're using copyrighted or copyright-free music, be sure to keep track of the song name, album, artist, year, whether it's Canadian content or not, what the content category is, and when in the project it was used, to make logging easier afterwards. You can add music to your project by dragging it into the window or importing it through the menu. Here you see you can just drag it right in and it imports. You can also do it through the File menu, Import Audio. Whenever you're importing audio, you'll encounter two issues with the songs that you've imported. Firstly, digital music is mastered to be about as loud as it possibly can be while still sounding good. This means that it's going to usually overpower your dialogue, and the gain must be turned down. Here's how you can do that. Here we see a minus and a plus. We're going to drag it towards the minus to make the gain quieter. Let's say -15, and we'll see how it sounds. Up next on the ones and twos, we're listening to my favorite royalty-free band. They're called the Blue Dot Sessions. The song Pedal Rider, the album Skittle. Check it out. Ooh. I think that worked. I think that sounded just about right. What do you think? Let me know in the comments. You gotta love the Blue Dot Sessions, Pedal Rider, Skittle, freemusicarchive.org, RIP. The second issue that you may encounter is that the music file might be too long. An easy way to trim it down is to highlight the section you want to use using the selection tool, which if we remember is right up there. Let's say we want to use 30 seconds of this piece. So we're going to grab it around, that's a little bit more than 30 seconds. Let's say we want about that, and we grab it and we highlight the section that we want to use. Now you can trim it down to just the selected part of the audio by using Command T on a Mac, Control T on a PC, or using this trim tool right here, Trim Audio. Now this is all we have. So it's a really easy, quick way to get that audio that you want to use. There's also a reverse version of it where, let's say we hate this section, don't want to hear that section. We can silence only that section from an audio track as well, using what we call the Silence Audio tool. Whenever you're adding music to a project, make sure that it has a sufficient fade in and fade out. That means that the volume gradually rises as the music begins to play and gradually fades out as it ends. This will ensure that the music does not distract listeners or catch them off guard. Let's hear what it sounds like without a fade in. Hey Toronto, can't get enough of the Christmas spirit this year? So we're going to apply a fade in by using the selection tool to select the first 3 to 5 seconds. And we're going to go up to effects and fade in. And now we'll do the same thing with the outro, the end of the music. Select 3 to 5 seconds, effect, fade out. Now let's listen to how it sounds going into it now. Hey Toronto, can't get enough of the Christmas spirit this year? We'll also listen to how the end sounds. To 9 p.m. every night. More details to come. So it's a lot more gradual and not as startling as when the music just starts. You can also control track volume using the envelope tool right up here. This allows you to program gain however you like. The track begins at full volume all the way across. The envelope tool allows you to create nodes that make the track volume less than 100%. The closer we click down to the 0, the quieter it will be. See, this blue outline is showing what's going to happen with the overall track volume. If we want it to get louder again, we can start clicking back out. This is useful to do a more customized fade in and fade out or any other kind of a gain program. Let's just listen to hear what it sounds like. It won't make a lot of sense. I just want to show you kind of how it works. Hey Toronto, can't get enough of the Christmas spirit this year? Well, come out to a Nutcracker Christmas at the castle. And now the music's going to get loud. Transforming into a winter wonderland just in time for Christmas. With a month of signature holiday decor, outdoor light displays, performances, Santa's workshop, festive food. So that's how to use the envelope tool for more of a customized fade in, fade out, or other kind of gain programming. Remember back in recording when we recorded an extra 10 seconds while remaining quiet? In this case, it was a little bit less than 10 seconds just for this demo, but usually you want to record about 10 seconds. Anyways, let's listen back to it. Well, even though nobody's talking, the recording still isn't completely silent. We might hear the sound of the environment, from appliances to the lights, to reverberations coming off of the walls or other flat surfaces, or sounds coming from other rooms. We might also hear a light electric buzz from the preamp or from the microphone. So we call this background sound the noise floor, since it's the quietest our recording can possibly be given that setup. It's the floor of our noise levels. To achieve the best possible sound quality, radio and podcast producers reduce this noise floor to varying amounts. The lower the noise floor, the less noise listeners hear during the quiet moments of a piece, and the more quiet it can actually be. But when the noise floor is too low, audio may begin to sound dead or spacey. So to reduce the noise floor, we're going to go to the time selection tool, and we're going to select the recorded silence that we did. We're going to go up to the effects menu and go to noise reduction, and then click Get Noise Profile. So Audacity has now sampled your noise floor and can remove it from the rest of the audio pretty effectively. So what we can do now is we can select the entire track with the time selection tool and drag the entire thing. You can also use Command A on a Mac or Control A on a PC. And now we've got it all selected. We're going to go up to Effects and we're going to go back to Noise Reduction. But this time, rather than getting noise profile, we're going to actually move to step 2, which is the noise reduction. So we have to set our noise reduction parameters. And I always recommend setting them nice and low, and you can repeat the noise reduction a number of times. Let's say we do 3 across the board, something like that. That's probably a good route. So we're going to do the noise reduction. Okay. It's applied it. And now let's listen back to the audio and see how much noise we're hearing. You can end a recording by clicking stop. You can also temporarily pause a recording by clicking pause. Always record an extra 10 seconds with the microphones at the same level at the end of your recording and stay silent. So how does that sound to you? To me, it sounds pretty good. If we wanted to keep reducing the noise, if we were hearing some buzzing that sounded better from last time before we noise reduced, but still was there, we might do Command A, Control A on a PC to select everything. And we can actually just repeat rather than having to go effect and noise reduction, blah, blah, blah. We can just go right here, repeat noise reduction. That's also, it's Command R on Mac or Control R on PC, or it's in this effects menu. So repeat noise reduction. And as you can see, it did it again. And if we hit Control R again, it'd do it again. So let's listen to it now. Probably will sound about the same. As I said, the noise floor was pretty good on this recording, so it's not too bad, but let's just hear it now. You can end a recording by clicking stop. You can also temporarily pause a recording by clicking pause. Always record an extra... Yeah, so it doesn't sound all that different, but depending on your recording setup, how much noise are in the room, this can be a really, really helpful thing. If you ever find that you've done too much noise reduction and it starts sounding spacey or echoey or just kind of funky, spacey is usually what it kind of sounds like, or it just sounds dead. You can always do Command Z or on a Mac or Control Z on a PC to undo the noise reduction. So to do an undo, you can go into File. To undo, you can go up to Edit and just click Undo Noise Reduction right there. And we might do it a number of times, or you can always redo it. One other way to make your audio sound clearer is to reduce the lowest frequencies in it, meaning the sounds with the lowest pitches. This is especially true if a recording was done outside, as wind typically appears as a low frequency on a recording. To do this, we're going to use something called a high-pass filter. So just like noise reduction, we're going to take the time selection tool and we're going to select our whole track. You can always use Command A or Control A, go up to the effects menu, and we're going to go all the way down to high pass filter. Now, what high pass means is anything that's higher than this cutoff frequency passes through the filter without being touched. But anything lower than the cutoff frequency starts getting cut off. So we're pulling out these low sounds. The human voice is typically somewhere between 85 hertz and 255 hertz. So we want to be pulling out sounds that are lower than the human voice because these are the sounds that we don't really want focused on. So we're going to, right now it's already set at 75, but as you can see, it can go all the way up to very high pitched noises and all the way down to the lowest, but we're going to set it at 75. And we just rolled it off at 6 dB per octave. But you can mess around with that depending on what it needs. So let's hear how it sounds. You can end a recording by clicking stop. You can also temporarily pause a recording by clicking pause. So it's tough to tell because the recording wasn't particularly boomy or low to begin with, but you will certainly notice that if you ever doing kind of like an outdoor recording and there's lots of wind noises, that using the high pass filter is really effective. So let's just look at that one more time. We're going up to the effects menu, going to high pass filter, setting our cutoff frequency around 85, and then something like 6. As I said with noise reduction, it's always best to do as little effects as possible. And then if you think you needed it more, you can repeat and repeat. And then if you went too far, you can always undo. But that's a better way to than try to get it all done in one shot. You can always just repeat. So you've completed your audio project. Way to go. Save a copy of your Audacity project to your computer so that you can go back and make edits as necessary. Remember, at CJRU, you'll want to save it into your volunteer folder. So let's just do that now. We're in Frida. We're going to call this one Final because we've made all of the edits that we want to make to it. So to differentiate it from one that was being edited or was in progress. So Audacity projects can't be played on media players or uploaded to web players and are tricky to send from computer to computer. So if you'd like a copy for editing in another software, something like Ableton or Audition, you'll need to mix your project down by exporting it as a WAV file. We're going to be speaking about that later. So once you've finished your project and you're ready to export it and send it around the web or send it to someone else or open it in a different application, you need to make sure that you've edited the metadata. So metadata is data about your audio track that's encoded within it. And it can include the year it was created, the title, the artist, album, track number, genre, description, images even, and more. Metadata can be read by media players, web platforms, and mobile devices. So it's always a good idea to include correct metadata in your file so that it's properly identified wherever it goes. Think of it as your file's identification or its passport. So you can go File, Edit Metadata, and let's just drag the window in here. So now I can put in the artist name, Frida, track title. We're going to call it tutorial final. And onwards and onwards. As you can see, there's a couple more things: album title, track number, year, genre, comments. You can probably add different categories as well. And the whole point is that basically when I export it, it's going to have all this information baked into it. So wherever it gets opened, whether that's on a web player or different software, it's going to know exactly who this is by and what it's called. So once we've edited our metadata, the final step is making sure your project is ready to be opened in another software or distributed by exporting it. So the export submenu is under File, and it's going to give you a few options. Export audio. There's also export selected audio if we just grabbed a little bit, or export multiple if we wanted to export our tracks differently. But let's just focus on export audio to keep it simple. Today we're going to be focusing on two format options, which is MP3 and WAV file. So if you're exporting a file to be edited further in another software, it's best to use the WAV file so that your information will have more information, so that your file will have more information and will therefore be more flexible to different kinds of mixing. WAV file is uncompressed. It's a big, large file with all kinds of information in there. But if you're happy with it and you're ready to distribute it around the web or in other ways over email, through a USB key, it's best to export it as an MP3 file, a format you're probably already familiar with. It's highly compressed and will have a much smaller file size than the WAV, something like 1/100th of the size, meaning that it's much easier to upload, send, stream, and download. So if you want your file to spread far and wide, MP3 is the format for you. So let's do MP3 for now, but it's the same thing if we just clicked WAV. We're going to click on it. We're going to choose where we want it to save. Let's say it's going to go into our volunteer folder at CJRU, volunteer, Frida, save. And one more opportunity to edit the metadata before we save it. Okay. And exporting it. And that's it. That's the whole kit and caboodle. If we went into our volunteer folder, not that I'm sure you trust me, but just to show you, if we went into it, we'll see here we have the MP3, and we could open this in iTunes and VLC, QuickTime Player. We couldn't do that with our Audacity project. Well, that brings us to the end of our tutorial video. I hope it helped you to get comfortable with Audacity and start making your ideas happen. If you have any questions about anything in the video, if you have corrections, things I did wrong, or if you have feedback, please let me know at volunteer@cjru.ca. That's my email address. And if you're not familiar with our station, check us out on the radio dial at 1280 AM in Toronto. CJRU 1280 AM on your internet radio app, or cjru.ca on the web. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for our next video on recording a PSA.